Hey everybody, this is Devon.
And Kate.
Welcome to Med Crimes.
Hi everybody.
Guess what?
What?
I'm in the pod lab. This is the first, I think our last 3 episodes we were remote.
Yeah. No, was it 3 or 2?
We did 3.
You're right, it was 3.
We did 3.
This is nice.
We were in the pod lab for our Patreon party.
Our Patreon. That was great. We loved seeing you guys. You were the best.
Thank you for everybody that came out.
Yeah, that was amazing.
It was such a nice little way to celebrate. We loved it.
It was so fun. We can't wait to do it again sometime soon.
We're back.
We are literally back.
We are back.
We're back with a good one, too. We're going to talk about Jolly Jane Toppan, which is like an old-timey case because I feel like we've been very modern lately with our cases, which is great because we like to talk about the current events and stuff, but it's time to take a step back because sometimes that gets like a little depressing and the old-timey stuff just kind of takes you back.
The current events suck.
Patreons, we have so many. Thank you so much, you guys, and welcome. We also have a lot of new listeners. Welcome.
Oh my God, we've gotten a lot of new listeners. It's really great.
We understand that what it's like to have a couple of podcasts that you really love and how people kind of in general, at least me, rarely deviate from that.
Right.
And so taking a leap of faith
and trying something
into another
new
podcast is like a whole thing and you have to be in the right mood and the right mindset. So we really appreciate you guys taking a leap of faith and we're glad you're here.
Thank you. And thank you for some of those people that have said, oh, I've gone back to the beginning.
I know.
Now bear with us. The beginning sometimes was a little rough.
Yes. Disclaimer.
Thank you. It's awesome.
Yes.
I mean, at this point in time, you're catching up with 32 hours worth, give or take. So
the beginning content is great. There's a couple of incredible stories in the beginning, but yeah, the audio is a little rough, so we apologize. We've since really worked on it. And
we were newborns, and now we're toddlers.
We are toddlers.
So
we're one.
We want to welcome our so many new Patreons. Yes. Welcome to our family. First, we have Ray Ray.
Ray Ray, hey girl, I see you. We love you. We have Christina Jordan.
Hi, Christina.
Welcome.
KJ. That's what I want to call her. KJ.
Oh, hell yeah, KJ.
We have Shay David.
I mean, that name.
I hope I got that right.
Wow, that name. That's what I'm saying. We have Debbie Ruiz.
Hi, Debbie.
Hi, Debbie.
Debbie. Jennifer Baker. Oh, my God. I hope you're a baker.
Oh my God, do you bake, Jennifer?
Cookies?
We hope you bake.
God, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, I took that from you.
Oh, it's fine. Mandy Bossarge. Welcome, Mandy.
Mandy.
Another really cool name. A lot of cool names.
And then we have Jessica Bergie Couch.
Yay, Jessica
Welcome.
Bergie Couch. Dude.
So many of you. Thank you for joining our family.
Yes.
The 7 of you are what? Woodland creature.
So you guys are wizards.
Ooh.
And you've been around for a long time. You're old-timey, really wise wizards with cool staffs and shit.
My mind went to because there's 7 of them, the 7 deadly sins.
Ooh. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I would be gluttony.
Devon would be gluttony. I would be shame. Shame, I don't think is a deadly sin.
No,
but
I don't think it is. No, it's not. All right. Shame us into our way of Jolly Jane, please.
I shall. That was a really funny segue. All right. So today's episode, we are going to talk about Jane Toppan, who was an American serial killer and nurse who lived from 1857 till 1938. And she confessed to a total of 31 murders.
What?
She confessed to these murders in 1901, and she was actually one of America's first female serial killers.
No kidding.
This is going to be a big, fat, juicy two-parter.
Oh, geez.
Because there is a lot on Miss Jolly Jane.
Great. Okay.
I am going to preface this.
Knowing this, you just set myself up for a little bit of extra time to get my next episode ready. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
Appreciate it.
So we're going to talk a lot about her early life and her nursing career, the beginnings of her nursing career. There's a lot in her early life, and this woman's childhood was just so incredibly tragic. And so this whole episode contains themes of mental illness, child abuse, and sexual assault.
Oh, gosh.
So trigger warning. And we will, before we go into detail about any of those things, I'll give you a heads up, but just so everybody's aware. Shall we?
Thank you for making me aware.
You're welcome. So, like I said, in her early life, this was like pretty tragic. And literally, if any human being was going to be raised to be a serial killer, it would be this lady's childhood that would create that. This is how it would happen. So she was born Honora Kelly, very different name than Jane Toppan, but we'll talk about that. In March 31st, 1854, she was born to two Irish immigrants. And at the time, in the city of Boston, which is where they were at, Irish immigrants were discriminated against pretty hard, and they were seen as lower class citizens, and there were a lot of them. So they would, they would immigrate from, I can't talk. They would immigrate from Ireland and then seek work. But since the area was so flooded and they were being discriminated against, it was really hard for people to find work. A lot of times they were living in poverty. It was a really very sad situation. Mm-hmm. So her mom was Bridget Kelly, and unfortunately her mom died of tuberculosis when she was an infant.
Oh, no.
So she never,
sad.
I know, she never really had her mom at all since she was just a very young baby. Now, her father, Peter Kelly, was known as an eccentric guy, but Jane later reported that he was an alcoholic and very abusive. Her father actually was nicknamed by the people around him and the people in town as, quote, Kelly the Crack, which is short for Kelly the Crackpot, is what they meant.
Oh.
Like they thought he was, mentally ill. And it sounds like just from what, is being reported, he may have had pretty profound mental health issues. I mean, there was a rumor, and this is unsubstantiated, this is just was floating around about him, that he had sewn his own eyelids shut while working as a tailor.
I'm sorry, what?
That is a thing that he was said to have done to himself. I don't know.
How'd you see to be able to do that?
Devon, I don't know.
I mean, the first eye, maybe. Did they have mirrors back in the 1850s?
Devon is literally, the wheels are turning. She's trying to work out the logistics of how one would physically accomplish this.
Let's think about this.
I know. Devon, I know. It's wild. Again, unsubstantiated. That could just be something some douchebag made up about him to, further their claim that.
Don't try this at home.
Let's not try this at home. So, that obviously raises the questions of were there mental health issues in the family that could have been also, passed down?
Probably something that we would be well aware of now, but
sure.
150 years ago, 170 years ago.
Yeah, long time ago.
Yeah.
So the kids, so she had two siblings. She had two sisters. Both of them were older than her. And they were all known to wander the streets of Boston just in tattered clothes, and they had obvious bruises on them reportedly, and they were very thin, very obviously neglected, completely neglected. And just so everyone's aware, if a kid is, that they have this one parent who's an alcoholic and is abusive, obviously they're not getting the affection that they need, and their mom had died.
They're not even getting the physical care that they need.
No,
let alone
not
the
at
affection.
all. Exactly. So, Jane, having been so young at the time, or Honora, as she was born as Honora. Her name is at this point is Honora, and she went by Nora, apparently. Her being so young and having a complete absence of affection and love from essentially infancy, particularly during the first 2 years of life, if you don't have that connection with somebody and the love and the affection that is really required, it can it prevents the release of oxytocin within the brain and can severely impact emotional and cognitive development.
Well, imagine always having that constant longing from your parent.
Oh God, I can't imagine what that must be like.
Each day over and over. If you're trying to wonder from it with like a spouse or a partner, maybe you have a new spouse or a partner because they're not giving you what you need. But when it's a parent, you can't exactly just change that up.
Exactly. And then especially in the first 2 years of life, these are such critical formative years that with the absence of that,
you need that comfort.
You do. But it also like really stunts your growth as a person.
Oh, yeah.
And this is
Very
one of the
much
things
so.
that can cause antisocial personality disorder, like we've talked about. Which is like essentially being a sociopath and having no emotions and not be able to access emotions properly because they don't have that availability. Now, people who endure treatment like this from a very young age are at risk, like I said, for antisocial personality disorder and other mental illnesses. And some of the listed implications from a behavioral standpoint include delinquency, depression, reduced intelligence, aggression, and disinhibition. So it's very possible that these early critical years played a huge role in her challenges were later on.
I think years later, as we've been looking in the mental health industry, it's been proven that some of those circumstances. First of all, we're going to apologize for any thumping you might hear in the background.
There are humans above our head.
Not only is it my first time back in the pod lab, it's the first time in a long time that our children are together upstairs while we record.
I thought they were going to sit quietly and play Mousetrap, but clearly there's a game of,
hilarious.
The floor is lava or something is going on. I know. All right. Now, in 1860, which is only a few years after his wife's death, Mr. Kelly, their father, took his two youngest children, and this was 8-year-old Delia and 6-year-old Honora at this point. She's 6 years old. And she brought them to Boston Female Asylum. And this was an orphanage for female children. And Kelly surrendered the two girls, and they never saw him again. I'm telling you, this childhood is no joke, hell on earth that these kids went to. So she, I think, became a prostitute, is what I heard. Oh my God! Yeah, isn't that terrible?
Oh,
Isn't that rough? It's just so sad, Some people, I just firmly believe that some people on this earth are given like zero chance.
I can only imagine the conditions of this orphanage that you're
about
to tell me.
Well, that's the thing. And, documents from the asylum note that they were rescued from a very miserable home. So I think, we don't know exactly the extent of the abuse, but I'm sure it was very severe. And no records exist of Delia or Honora experiencing anything in particular during their time at an asylum. But we know that back then asylums were not like really, or orphanages were not like really regulated.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I can only imagine the conditions of it.
Exactly. So in November 1862, less than 2 years after being abandoned by their father, Nora Kelly was placed as an indentured servant in the home of Miss Anne C. Toppan from Lowell, Massachusetts. Now, indentured servants are sort of a way to get abandoned children or wayward children sort of out of orphanages and into homes that will take care of them. But
so
essentially,
where they're fed and bathed and clothed,
sure,
but she's there to work.
But she's the servant. Exactly. So she's 8.
That's awful.
She's 8 years old.
This sounds like slavery.
It literally is slavery. So she's literally 8 years old. She's going to live with this very wealthy woman who went by the Widow Toppan was her name. The Widow Toppan.
Sounds so formal.
I know. So they never like formally adopted her or anything, but Honora did end up taking the surname of her benefactors and eventually became known as Jane Toppan. Now, the original Toppan family actually already had a daughter named Elizabeth, who was around the same age. And actually, throughout her childhood, Elizabeth and Jane stayed on very good terms, and Elizabeth treated her well.
Good.
Elizabeth, she was happy to have a friend to play with. She was an only child. The two
So then that
really got
was
along.
probably helpful to Jane too.
Exactly. Her mom figure, though, the widow Toppan, did not treat her well. She treated her just as a slave and bossed her around, gave her many chores to do, and just treated her like cheap labor, essentially. She often also criticized her and humiliated her due to her Irish roots and due to who her father was, and just she was humiliated on the regular. So this...
How awful.
Isn't
so
that
did
awful?
she, for an 8-year-old girl.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah, 8 years old. Yeah. So
there's so much damage that's already been done in her infant toddlerhood.
Oh, yeah.
And then now
it's
for
wild.
what she's doing as her brain's even forming.
Yeah, exactly.
Continuing to form.
It just is, it's wild to think that people actually lived through stuff like this. So one of the reasons she changed her name to Toppan is because she did not any longer want to be associated with her father, number one.
With the crackpot?
Yeah, no kidding. And number two, she was very ashamed of her Irish roots. Unfortunately, many Irish immigrants back then were. And she wanted to really distance herself from that and give herself the opportunity to eventually create a little bit of a new life.
Right.
So she was feeling a lot of shame just having the last name Kelly. Now, while living in that house, the one good thing that they did for her was give her an education. So they did put her through school.
Oh, good.
Anytime she wasn't in school, obviously, she was working her tail off, doing chores in the house.
Right.
But they did put her through school. Now, in school, she started trying to create a new identity for herself, through her child, to different groups of friends. So she would go by the name of Toppan, obviously, and she made no mention of her Irish roots. And she would say things that her father was this respected world traveler, and that she created this fake brother that was a war hero, and she would tell stories about.
That's lovely, but also so sad.
Well, it's a little disturbing, She's kind of creating these, these grandiose, obvious lies that were, I think she was doing it, as a way to sort of get her.
She's getting shame from her quote unquote mother.
Well,
and
exactly.
So if she's trying to bring and build friendships.
Exactly.
It's
but
not
this
surprising.
was more insidious too, and it starts getting more insidious as she gets a little bit older, because if people started to learn who she really was and what she really did, then they would challenge her or question her, and then she would go make up a bunch of lies about that person and then try to ruin their relationships and their reputation with a whole bunch of rumors. And then she starts, this is her starting to exhibit.
Going on and on and on and on and on.
This is all very ASPD, antisocial personality disorder in my mind. This is such a feature of that. Yes. So this behavior kind of continues throughout school. Anybody challenged, she charmed and pleased the people that it really mattered. And then the people that got in her way, she would lie about them and, ruin them, do what she could to kind of ruin them and get ahead of them. So Elizabeth, who's Lady Toppan's daughter, the daughter of the lady that she's living with, again, always really kind to Jane, but Jane was always super jealous of her because Elizabeth obviously had this great life, was born into, with a silver spoon in her mouth.
She doesn't have to fake her identity.
No, she has everything handed to her. And literally it was Elizabeth's mom would say, "Oh, no, you honey, you just relax, sit on the couch. You've had a long day at school. Jane, you go do this, you go do that." And literally it was such a, separation between the two of class in the house.
Wow.
That Jane grew very, very resentful of Elizabeth. Even though Elizabeth treated her well, she just resented her for having the life that she really wanted. She wanted to be powerful and wealthy, and that she knew that Elizabeth was just going to grow up and marry another wealthy guy and have a very leisurely, pleasureful life, and she would never know what that is like. So,
did she take it out on Elizabeth?
Well, we'll talk about it. Oh, not for a long time. So Jane turns 18. So at age 18, you can be released from being an indentured servant. So
Yeah, but now what's she going to do?
well, exactly. So she had literally nothing to her name, and she had no one. Since she had not been successful at improving her social class based on only her lies, she really had nowhere to go and no one that would really hire her so that she could work anywhere. So she ended up actually remaining in the Toppan household for an additional 10 years under the title of housekeeper. So instead of being like an indentured servant, she was more of a housekeeper position. But she lived
she was
there.
almost 30.
Yeah. Well,
Wow.
no, at this point she's 18.
Right.
So, but until she was almost 30. So
Right.
this is until age 28.
Right.
So
That's almost 30 is what I said.
thank you, Devon.
You're welcome.
You're right. I'm sorry. I misunderstood you. So, so the widow Toppan dies, okay? And Elizabeth, her daughter, received, of course, the entire fortune.
Right. Here's your whole estate.
Yes, exactly. And then she marries this deacon in the area who was super well respected, also very powerful guy. Jane, of course, this is like her jealousy is like coming to a head right now. And the other thing, too, is that she watched her like fall in love with this guy. And Jane had never like known what it's like to be in love. She'd never had that type of connection or relationship. She read a lot of romance novels and was just like really longing for that, I think, in her life.
Yeah.
So she was okay. So at this point, Jane is 28 years old, right? Mm-hmm. And all of this jealousy is like kind of coming to a head, and she's like, I got to get out of here. Like, what can I do to change my life? Mm-hmm. So she decides to enroll in nursing school. Now, nursing, was far from a high society position as it's, what I mean, as it still is. But
it's still like, especially back then, it was very, still servant,
yes,
like,
very much so.
Right.
It was definitely developing. You had to have a degree to work as a nurse,
right?
But the roles and responsibilities were very different than they are now. Obviously, they had very fewer things that could be done in general back then, so the responsibilities were less. But
it's evolved over 150
years. It has evolved quite a bit. Yes, as we all have. So, now, this would at least give her like a little bit of independent income, a little bit of freedom to be able to get out of the house and start to, it was definitely a step up from being a housekeeper. So she starts studying and working at the Cambridge Hospital in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Wow. Now, nurses during this time, they went to school like in hospitals, and the workload was pretty intense because they were required to work long hours at the hospital as nurses' aides, in addition to studying and doing classwork. So it was similar to clinical, but it was like every single day. You do a shift and then school. Like
almost
shift
like
school.
Like a residency kind
similar.
of? Yeah.
Yes, very similar.
Basically living there.
Exactly right. So for a lot of people, it was unmanageable. I mean, if you were trying to, manage a family or something, it would be next to impossible to get this done. For her, actually, she excelled. She did great with this because she had her whole life been worked to the bone. So she's like, this is nothing. You know what I mean?
New.
This is literally nothing. So
but for the first time, something that she was doing on
good
her own
at.
And wanted
exactly.
to do.
She was a workhorse. She could put her head down and get shit done because she had done that her entire life. She knew exactly how to do that. So she's working and studying at the Cambridge Hospital. Now, all the staff initially really liked her, and it seemed like she did great. She was very charming and cool-headed, always willing to help, especially with the higher-ups. So she's already working very hard to make some very important connections with a lot of respected physicians, administrators at the hospital, and people that would really make a difference.
She knows where the power teat is.
Yes, she knows exactly where it is.
Yeah.
She knows exactly where it is. So here
Which
is
smart. Good for her.
Exactly. And here is actually where she earned the nickname Jolly Jane, because everybody thought she was just so happy all the time, pleased to help. And it seemed like she was really good at sort of putting on that mask and putting on a front right here. This is the first time she actually felt like admiration and acceptance from literally anyone.
Right.
You know, she's 28 years old. She's finally having someone look at her with something
where
other
she
than disdain.
And fits in, and like they're feeling
And is
prideful
excelling.
for her.
Exactly. So she's like finally feeling some success in this.
She's in a good place.
Well, yeah, she is. Now,
And then you end
everything
up on
always
med
fucking
crimes.
falls apart, right?
You end up on
She's
med
on
crimes.
med crimes, so here she is. Now, Jane later described that if a patient she really liked and cared for at the hospital would like be ready to go home, she would start giving small doses of substances and medications that were not ordered for them that would make them feel worse, because she wanted them to stay. She never gave enough for them to deteriorate, but it would be enough to make them sick enough to remain in the hospital for a few more days.
And so it begins.
And so it frickin' begins. Now, this very quickly escalated. Once, you know, she was getting bored with doing that, she started experimenting with medications more for fun. And she stated that she was genuinely interested in seeing what each dose and medication would do to a person. This is when things start to get very dark.
Go into research.
Yeah, right?
Clinical trials.
You don't need to be at the bedside.
You
Although
don't
I don't think they had all that stuff with nurses
start
back
it.
then.
You know,
Yeah.
you
Be a
don't need
pioneer
to
in
do
your
it to the
field.
humans.
Yeah, exactly. Jane stated that she did begin administering lethal doses of medications while she was in school at Cambridge.
Did she know they were lethal?
Well, she was experimenting with a lot
So
of
she knew it
things.
could happen.
She knew it could happen, and what she wanted to see, what different combinations would do to different people.
Again, you don't test chemistry on humans.
No, you do not do that.
No. It's not advisable.
She starts administering these like lethal doses to people, right? And she was very methodical. Like each and every time she would make efforts to cover her tracks. She would always like fix the documentation. She would always try to make sure nobody was looking or had any idea she was anywhere near the room. Like she did really try very hard to, you know,
Cover her tracks.
Cover her tracks every time. Her drugs of choice, at least initially, were morphine and atropine.
Oh.
Yeah. So morphine is an opioid
Damn.
analgesic pain medicine, and it acts by blocking pain receptors in the central nervous system. Nowadays, it's used in oral, IV, and subcutaneous forms. It's still, you know, used very often. It's actually a medication that's been around for ages and ages to treat episodes of acute discomfort and sometimes chronic pain as well. Opioids in general carry a lot of risk. They are a habit-forming medicine, and they can create dependence if they're used for a long period of time. And of course, if you're using too much, it can depress the central nervous system enough to lower our respiratory drive to dangerous levels and essentially cause you to suffocate and die. Now, atropine is an anticholinergic and an antispasmodic. It's got several uses in many different dosage forms. It can be used to treat gastrointestinal spasms. It can be used as eye drops for a number of eye ailments. And it can be used to dry up secretions and respiratory secretions. It's often in the hospital setting given through the IV as an urgent, like code medication for people that are profoundly bradycardic or have very, very low heart rates. And it will speed up the heart rate.
In my setting, the first time I ever saw atropine eye drops, and then I'm like, why does it say give sublingual? And I was like, what?
Yes,
But
literally.
for end of life secretions and trying to
It's
make somebody
used
breathe and
routinely.
be more comfortable.
Yep. Absolutely. Now, given in doses that are too high, this can cause low blood pressure, flushing, tachycardia, respiratory depression, coma, hallucinations, and death. So, likely the two given together, or even just separately, in excess, could easily cause death. And by means of just large-scale tissue damage and respiratory arrest. She would specifically enjoy giving them morphine doses without them knowing, watching them doze off and like get really zonked from it. And then she would give them a dose of atropine, and she would watch like what their heart rate and blood pressure did in reaction and like how it reacted different ways.
So she was studying.
Like, this is the most fucked up
yeah.
thing.
So she's like, they're lab rats.
They're literally lab rats. She would often administer doses of the drugs hidden in a glass of Hunyadi Llanos mineral water.
What the hell is
or
that?
Hunyadi, I think is how it's pronounced, actually. And if anybody out there knows exactly how it's pronounced, please let me know.
I don't even know what it is.
So this was a widely popular around the time drink. It was a mineral water that was very bitter, and it was marketed to be like a cure-all for digestive issues, essentially. Yeah. And
clean you out.
Yeah, essentially. It's very bitter tasting, and it hides the taste of medications and chemicals very well because it's bitter. So she did this all within sort of the first year at Cambridge Hospital. Now, we're going to talk about her first victim, or first attempted known victim, Amelia Finney. So we know the details of what happened here because Amelia survived the ordeal. And when she finally put it together that this was the lady years later that did this to her, she came forward and told her story, and it was very alarming. So she recalls, So Amelia was under treatment at Cambridge for a uterine ulcer. Jane Toppan took care of her and had attempted to kill her. Miraculously, Amelia survived the ordeal. Trigger warning, in the next minute or so, we're going to be discussing sexual assault. So she recalls that shortly after she was asked to drink a very bitter medicine by Jane, her body stopped moving. She felt like she had temporary paralysis. She was very, very out of it and kind of confused, but she does remember sort of forcing herself to kind of stay with it and be aware of her surroundings because it felt very, very wrong. She tried moving and speaking, but she could not. And she initially thought that she was having a nightmare or sleep paralysis episode because it was very vivid and she couldn't move.
This is reminding me of an episode we did where the doctor did the sexual assault.
Yes. I remember that too. So that was Schneeberger. Yeah. So she couldn't move or speak. Now, she recalls that Jane leaned over her and began to kiss her all over her body, fondle her chest, and touch her between her legs.
God.
Jane then held a glass to her lips and asked her to drink more. She was thankfully with it just enough to purse her lips shut and not drink anymore. And I think this is what saved her life. Amelia also recalls that Jane forced her closed eyes open and gazed directly into them.
Oh, man.
Which is terrifying.
Yeah.
Almost as if she was waiting to watch the life leave her eyes.
Oh, my God.
Which how fucked up is that?
Oh, my God.
Right? My God.
Oh.
So she woke up later on and did tell staff what happened. They all kind of just reached the assumption that this must have been a dream. There's no way
some
that
kind of
happened.
delusion.
Yeah. You're on some medications. You're pretty sick. This there's no way that this just
How terrifying
happened.
for her.
Can you imagine? But she kind of wrote it off too because again, she was barely conscious through this, and she's it could have been a really weird dream. That makes sense.
So she wasn't. Do you think she wasn't feeling the physiological things that you feel after a frightening event?
I mean, I honestly don't know. She may have just been out of it enough to just not experience that.
God, how creepy.
So, she actually, until more allegations against Jane actually were released, she didn't put anything together, until years later. It was years before she realized that this actually did happen to me, and she came forward.
She probably started remembering more and more and was putting
probably.
it together.
How horrifying of an ordeal,
it's
though.
awful.
My God. So Jane did start, around within her first year, causing trouble among staff around this time. So she reverts back to her old school behaviors, where she starts telling these grandiose stories and lies about her life that are totally not true. And then if anybody calls her out,
right,
then she makes up rumors and tries to ruin them and just, tries to just get ahead doing that. But in the same vein is making sure that she's staying in the very good graces of all the important people. So all of these supervisors, physicians and, the supervisors on the unit are, loving her because she's, just so charming. But she's just generally like being a dick for her own amusement to everybody else.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's fun. So, she ultimately, because she was so good at staying in the good graces of all these important people, was recommended for a spot in the prestigious nursing program at Massachusetts General Hospital.
Wow.
This was the best nursing program in the country at the time.
I'm sure, because
it
Mass
was
Gen
incredibly,
is one of the best hospitals right now.
It still is, exactly.
But, right, so imagine back in the 80s this must be, right around then?
Students were essentially only able to get into this nursing program by recommendation.
Wow.
It was very, very selective,
Right.
very prestigious.
Right, wow, good for her.
Yeah, so...
Except for you dicked your way up there.
Well, exactly.
So not good for
Not
you.
so much. So Mass General Hospital, she gains the trust of a bunch of really important people there. And these people are like a step above the people at Cambridge. These are like the swankiest hospital in the country right now. Now, she did start again spreading rumors about staff, and anybody who rubbed her the wrong way, she would like be an asshole to and just totally, try to throw them under the bus. She stated later on that this was like the point in her life where she felt like she was the most powerful because all the higher ups again are loving her. Like she was just a super high value employee to them. She felt very untouchable. So she felt like she could do whatever else she wanted to.
That's a dangerous position to be in.
Oh, hell yeah, it is. So the year is now 1890. A staff member rats Jane out to her superiors for leaving the ward without permission. Now, at the time, nurses were expected to adhere to this code of conduct, both inside hospital walls and outside hospital walls. And if you read the code of conduct like nowadays, nurses at that time weren't allowed to smoke. They weren't allowed to go out and party. They weren't allowed to go out dancing. Like even outside hospital walls. You
always had to exhibit a certain standard.
A certain standard, exactly. So it seems kind of silly. Like now, they weren't allowed to do a lot of things even on their own time that normal people are allowed to do. But that was the thing about being a nurse back then. You had to exhibit, that certain way. So, unfortunately, this was in direct violation of the standards of conduct there, and she was immediately terminated from the program. Yeah. So...
Did they know that it was true?
Oh, yeah, it was true. She definitely left the ward. Yeah. And so she was immediately terminated. The nurses there, all took the program really seriously. So, and we're all very lucky to get in. So having a nurse blatantly ignore the code of conduct was very, very unusual. And having someone actually get terminated for violating it was almost unheard of. So it was a huge deal that happened.
And I'm sure she was thinking it was never going to happen because
Yeah.
so-and-so loves her and
Exactly.
they always see her as like the prize.
Exactly. Hey guys, if you're like us and you're fans of all things strange and scary, then let me tell you about this other podcast I've been listening to. The Conspirators is a bi-weekly podcast all about the darkest and most bizarre moments in our history. In each episode, your host, Nate Hale, an entirely fictional identity, takes you on a journey through some of the weirdest events in history. And what's most amazing is that they all really happened. You might hear about the real serial killer that stalked the streets of occupied Paris during World War II, the bizarre story of the Irishman who murdered his wife because he believed she was replaced by fairies, or about what's really going on in the Bermuda Triangle. These are the stories your history teachers never told you. If this all sounds really interesting or something you'd be into, then I encourage you to subscribe to The Conspirators today, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, she packed up and she left. She did work briefly as a private nurse before returning to Cambridge in the fall of 1890 to complete her studies. So she goes back to Cambridge. She continues to use her charm to gain favor of the higher ups and experiment with people's lives along the way. So she's still stealing chemicals and drugs, giving them to people and playing yo-yo with people's lives, killing a bunch of people and almost killing a whole bunch of other people. So finally, The supervisors of the ward noticed something was off when high volumes of these drugs and chemicals just have like vanished, gone missing.
I'm curious to know back in the 19th century what their system was for keeping track of those.
Well, the thing is,
I'm sure
I
it's
don't
very
think
basic,
they
but-
had much of a
Right.
system. Literally, she was doing this so much that the volume of stock was so noticeably down
Just
on the floor
depleting.
that they were like, where the hell is this going? We don't even
Right,
have that many
right,
patients with this
right.
with these drugs. And nothing was controlled, nothing was being,
Right.
carefully monitored. It
Right.
literally was that everything like we
It's
have no
reasons
stock.
like that as to why we have it now.
Exactly right. So, she was taking drugs at such a volume that, it just became very noticeable that these drugs were missing. And Jane was suspected because of some eyewitnesses, I guess, saw Jane like taking the drugs or dispensing them or spending a lot of time where they were kept or something like that. And having no patience in her assignment with those ordered drugs. So she was quickly dismissed from Cambridge as well. So at this point,
Just getting a track record.
despite how now having 4 years of nursing school under her belt, she does not have her license.
Oh.
Yeah, which is like a huge bummer.
Yeah.
So,
Could you imagine going through the 4 years we went through?
oh God, and not
You get
ending
nothing.
up and get nothing.
You
Oh
get
God,
nothing,
especially
kid.
with how expensive things are right now. Sorry, with how expensive school is. It's wild. Now, she still had these connections, though. She was smart enough to maintain all of these connections that she had with all of these physicians and administrators at Mass General and at especially Mass General, because they had seen her dismissal as just like a stupid, little thing that
Diplomatic.
didn't have
kind
any
of, yeah.
bearing on her skill as a nurse.
Right.
Right. So she was able to use these connections in her favor. She was so good at charming these people that they all vouched for her credibility as a nurse. And she used them all as references. And she started marketing herself as a private nurse. And because of her recommendations from these people, she was immediately a very hot commodity.
So they thought it was legit,
Oh, yeah.
regardless
And
of...
I mean, it was according to all these physicians, they had no reason to believe that she was, they had no idea that she was trying to kill people or killing people. They just thought she was a great nurse.
Then, do you just finish the program? Excuse me, I can't talk. And you're a nurse? Is
Yep.
there a certificate? There's
It's
no
a license. It was a licensure.
It was a license.
Yep,
then?
which she never received a license.
Okay.
And she never completed her program. So she is marketing herself as a private nurse because she's not going to be able to work in a hospital setting or a doctor's office or anywhere else.
So it's fraud.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Got it.
So, private nurses could make even more money than hospital nurses. It's exhaustive work, though, because back in this day, they didn't have shifts for private in-home nursing like they do now.
Right.
You were hired as a private in-home nurse, and you
lived
move.
there.
You live
Yeah.
there, and you nurse 20.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
responsible for them 24/7,
Right.
day and night. You do
Yes.
everything from sun up to sundown, and in the middle of the night, they need help. It's you. That's
Yeah.
what you got to
Yeah.
do. So it's exhaustive work, but again, this lady is really good at working really fucking hard all the
Going.
time and just not stopping. So again, that's her forte.
Go, go, go.
She's going. She's doing it. Now, this is fraudulently, but she is doing it. Now, it's typically like the wealthier population that can afford the private in-home care, which is like, it's
Still
the
the
case
case.
today.
Yeah.
So she ends up caring for some clients that had a lot of wealth and a lot of social power. Another, great connection that she wants to make sure that she maintains. So this was tougher for her, though, because as a nursing student, she had like unlimited access to medications and supplies, and she could play with whatever she wanted. And, now she doesn't have that supply room. She doesn't have that medication room. And being the one person in charge of their care, if a patient dies mysteriously,
It's on your watch.
she realized that would really impact her reputation, So she couldn't, very well just like kill all of her clients because she would very quickly, burn through her reputation doing that.
Don't take this, nurse.
Yep,
She's
exactly.
gonna kill ya.
That would impact her rehireability very significantly.
A little bit. Yeah. A little bit.
Yep. So she begins wondering, like, okay, well, I have this urge to kill people, and now what the hell am I going to do?
How
I
am I
can't
gonna
kill
do
my
it?
patients because I only got the one. So she starts turning to her own friends and family,
Oh no.
which, like, logic, whatever.
Not really.
So, Jane had an apartment in the early 1890s in a building owned by Israel and Lovely Dunham. They were her two landlords, which Lovely Dunham,
I love that name.
I
It's
am
lovely.
obsessed. It is quite lovely.
I want to be lovely.
They were
Dunham.
a very sweet elderly couple that owned the building. And they
Love that.
loved having Jane as a tenant because she brought them steady income every month. She was very reliable. She wasn't there a whole lot because, especially when she was a private nurse, she's spending whole lot of time with her clients.
So she's not doing a lot of damage to the building.
Exactly. And so she would also, they were an elderly couple, and she would go help them out. She would bring them groceries. She would help them with
that's
medical
sweet.
stuff. And she
Wait,
was,
what did she do to them?
yeah. So
Come on.
suddenly, Israel Dunham falls ill and dies. Now, his physician attributes his death to a strangulated hernia, which is when a hernia kind of gets twisted in your belly, and then that part of bowel becomes ischemic or doesn't have blood flow, and that can cause a massive
dies
infection.
and-
And then
yeah.
so if you don't get surgery very quickly, it can become life-threatening. So it was attributed to that and also heart failure. Now, he was very elderly, so there wasn't really much of a reason to suspect any foul play, according to his physician. So 2 years go by, and his wife Lovey dies, again, presumed to be related to ailments associated with old age.
But
Jane later admitted that she poisoned both of them.
fucker.
Yeah.
Probably did
Now-
it with the groceries she brought them.
Yeah, probably. Just put things in their drink. That was her big thing. She would put things in people's drinks.
Dick move.
Seriously. So from 1892 to 1900, she continued her private nursing career. And she had, a status as an honorable woman, for the first time ever. You know what I mean? Being a private nurse, making a shitload of money. And, bumping elbows with all these wealthy people.
High society clients.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
she's feeling like she's on top of the world now. Let's revisit her relationship with her foster sister, Elizabeth Toppin.
No.
Now, her jealousy of Elizabeth's life never resolved, of course.
Of course not.
Through all these years, Elizabeth continued to reach out to her. There was correspondence. They wrote letters. They were, she never just left her behind and forgot about her. Elizabeth always treated her with dignity and
Probably
respect.
tried to treat her like a sister.
Yes, exactly.
Jane would
She was the
allow.
sister that she never really had. Now, the lines of communication, like I said, had always been open. And Jane, who was 42 at this time in 1899, invites Elizabeth on a vacation with her. Now, where they wanted to go was out to Katamet, Massachusetts, which is out by the coast. And they rented a little cottage, and they were having beach
Katamet?
days. Katamet.
This is an area I've not heard of.
I haven't heard
and that
it
is
either.
surprising.
I know. I had never heard of it either, and I wonder if Google it real quick. See if
I
it's,
feel ashamed.
well, maybe
It's probably 3 hours from here, and I feel
probably.
ashamed.
I don't know.
I'm
Look it
gonna
up. Looking it up. She's looking it up,
I
y'all.
am the Googler.
Anybody from Katamet? I want to know. So, they were having beach days. They were eating good food. They were relaxing, and Elizabeth, during the trip, starts feeling unwell. Jane offered to give her some of that bitter mineral water to ease her symptoms. And Jane reported later that she had actually dissolved 3 tablets of strychnine in that water. Did you look up Katamet?
I did.
Does it exist?
It's a neighborhood in Bourne, Massachusetts. It's out on the Cape.
Okay, it's on the Cape, y'all.
Now I feel better. I'm sorry. What did she do?
So she dissolved 3 tablets of strychnine into some of that bitter mineral water and fed it to Elizabeth.
Am I supposed to know what strychnine is?
No, that's why I have all the information right here.
All right.
So strychnine is a colorless, bitter tasting, and highly toxic chemical, which is often used as a pesticide. Now, when it's inhaled or ingested by humans, strychnine is a neurotoxin.
Oh, gosh.
It acts as an antagonist for both glycine and acetylcholine receptors, and both of those play very essential roles in cellular turnover and also nerve and muscle function. So this affects primarily the nerve fibers in the spinal cord, which control, large groups of muscle contraction. And this causes rapid heart rate, low blood pressure, multi-organ system failure, shock, seizures, respiratory failure, and death in as little as 15 minutes after exposure, or as long as 24 hours after exposure.
Okay. That's terrible.
So Jane infamously describes her death, saying, quote, "I held her in my arms and I watched with delight as she gasped the life out," end quote.
Delight? Mm-hmm.
This woman, I'm telling you, there's nothing sweet about her. This is all, she is purely a sociopath that enjoys murdering people for fun.
That was like the one person from your childhood who was kind to you.
Yeah.
And who was...
She doesn't give a fuck. Nope. Doesn't care.
Man.
It's a warm body that she can watch slowly die. So that's all that matters to her. Now, Jane then called Elizabeth's husband the following morning to come quick. Your wife isn't doing well. And he arrived just in time to watch his wife take her final breath. And her death was attributed to a stroke.
Stroke my ass.
Jane later called Elizabeth's husband like a few days later and stated to him that, Elizabeth had mentioned that if anything ever happened to her, I could have her gold watch. Can I have it?
Bullshit!
Yeah. And he gave it to her.
No.
Because he had no reason to think that,
How ballsy to call up and be like,
she fucking murders her. And then she's not done taking from her. So she calls up her husband. She's like, I'm going to get her fucking gold watch too.
Oh, I hate her.
I literally...
I hate her.
This woman. She's awful. She is the worst. The literal worst. Well, guys, this is a good place to stop. Hell yeah.
You're leaving me hanging.
Hell yeah, I'm leaving you hanging. I'm really good at that.
Thanks for listening, everyone. If you're as irritated as I am and you want to know what happens next, make sure you catch part 2. You can also... follow us on Instagram at MedCrimes Podcast.
You can tweet at us, except Twitter is melting down right now, I hear.
I hear.
So maybe don't tweet at us. We don't know if we'll get it. Skip that one.
Or you can search us on Facebook at MedCrimes Podcast.
If you wish to become a Patreon, you can visit www.patreon.com/MedCrimesPodcast.
Then you can be part of our amazing new 7 Wizards.
I know. Guys are
you can
so
send
magical.
us your crazy stories, anything that you think we should hear. Engage with us, talk with us, chat with us, ask us questions, give us ideas at medcrimes@gmail.com.
And guys, I've gotten a couple people messaging me and asking like, hey, can I tell you a cool medical story that happened to me? And I'm like, oh my God, yes, send it to our email. If you guys have like a crazy thing that happened to you one shift or like a weird, creepy thing that happened, like please tell us about it because we're trying to make a compilation episode of all you guys' crazy stories. And if you send it to us, it might make the episode.
Oh, sweet.
So send us your cool stories. We want to know.
Yay. The end.
Toodles. Stay safe out there.